G'day everyone and welcome back to the shed. I'm just getting ready to weld our two panels together for our tailgate recess, and what I've got is one of the hammer form pieces inside here, but I've packed it up with a piece of plate underneath it, and that's going to give me about 8mm of material left. So I'm going to run the grinder around the edges and just take off the piece that's poking up, and it's not very much in this case, and so we'll rip this one off pretty easily, and then we'll reverse it and do the same thing on the other panel, and that's going to give me a recess in the back of about 16mm, 15mm, because a little bit of variance with grinding, so about 5/8 of an inch. We'll see how that looks. If it looks too deep, then I can rearrange what I've got and trim one of these pieces back a bit further, and we can tidy it up a bit if we have to. But I'm thinking until we see it, it's a bit early to call how it's going to look. And we might even tack it together and make the assessment after that as well. So I'll just rip this off, then we'll swap it over and get the other piece done, and then we're ready to start playing and welding it together, the fun bit. What I've done is just taken this edge down until the grinder's just started touching our hammer form plate, and it's pretty consistent all the way around. So if I run my finger over it, there's no raised edge there. So it's pretty consistently the same height all the way around. So that's really good. So we'll get the other one set up and we'll do the same again. Doesn't it look pretty spectacular? Now I've had to put a few clamps on this because the sheet wants to curl a little bit, so I've got it clamped down either side here. These spots either side here are nice and firm, so I don't have to worry about them. But the plate does spring a little bit in the middle, so I'm going to put these vice grips on the centre plate, and then I'm just going to have to move them as I go with the grinder. So a little bit more careful setting up, and we'll get a better result in the end. There's actually enough material here. I could actually mark it and run around with the tin snips and take it off, but it's all extra, tear it apart, put it back together time. So I'll just rip it off with the grinder. It'll come down pretty quick. That looks pretty nice. Although this is ripped down nice and flat, I've got no lumps and bumps, it's all lined up pretty well around there. Where we've worked it, I've got a few little gaps, so I'll take these formers off and I'm just going to hammer the edges back in to line up with the hammer form we've got in the middle. Naturally, where I've been grinding out from the piece of material, there's a little burr on the edge, and I'll get rid of all that as well, just so I don't cut myself. But also, I'm going to weld the outside edge, so I don't want extra material there that'll cause problems with our weld as well. Most of this is pretty good, so I think we'll leave the rest of it. It was mainly this corner down here that was poking out a bit, but we can tidy that up as we go. So we'll get into pieces. So that's just the packer I was using to hold our hammer form up, and that gave me my 8mm dimension. As long as we put this together the right way around, it'll all be good. So that actually sits on there really smartly, which naturally you would think it would. They're both made on the same former. So what we need to do now is just get this plate clamped down. We also got something else to be aware of here. Because we have formed all this shape into this metal, we've brought some stress into the panel, and already we've got a little bit of a curl up just in this corner here, same in there, and that can be worked out. But if we just start welding with this sitting loose like it is, all that stress is going to want to run wherever it can go, and our panel's just going to wobble all over the place. So I'll clamp the piece of flat along here again, the same along there, But then we've got to think about something else. We have put a big heat sink on one side of our weld. And as we know, areas of hot will want to run to areas of cold. So that's going to suck a lot of heat from our weld. But the other problem we've got is heat rises. So we're going to have half the heat coming up here and loading this area around all our weld into this panel, and we're going to have it running the other way and sucking it out of there. So I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. I'm going to sit one of the hammer forms on top to form a little bit of a heat sink, and that way we should get roughly the same heat transfer both ways. Won't be exact, but it'll be sort of in the ballpark, and we'll probably have to run with a bit more heat in the weld than what we normally would to get it to work. But it will be one of these welds that we're going to treat it with caution and just take it steady all the way around. And what I'll be doing first, before I worry too much about anything, is just getting it tacked together. So for the tacking, I'll clamp the edges through here. Won't worry too much about the heatsink on top because I want to be able to have access to my weld and to be able to move things around if I need to line things up a bit better as I go. But once it's tacked, it'll be stable. So I can take these off, we'll have a look at it then and decide how we look on the depth of our recess. Pretty easy, isn't it? We'll find out. One of my favourite YouTube channels that I watch regularly is Precision Transmissions. And Richard, star of the show, the man who owns the business, he's got a pretty good saying. It's pretty simple. Well, it's pretty simple. We'll see how we go with that. Okay, I can get to all my weld surfaces. It's going to need a little bit of hammering in a few spots just to get the edges to line up, but we'll be able to get it tacked in place. So crank the welder up and see what happens. Just feeling across the join here. This bit here needs bending in a little bit. So I'm just picking on spots that are actually lined up pretty well. But we've got a few spots along the top here that want tapping in. Yeah, no, I'm going to pull it apart, I think. Now I think that recess looks pretty damn nice. So I'm going to leave it at that depth there and we'll just continue on and weld it together. So I've just got to tidy up these edges now and get them all to sit nicely together. The top of it's just not quite sitting where I want it, so it's just a little bit of hammer and dolly work to get it right, and then we'll clamp it back down again and go to weld it. And I'm pretty certain I will crank the current up a little bit because the spots I've put in there, they've penetrated all the way through, but you can just feel by it's sucking the heat out of it. So No earth connection. Still closed? Yep. About to hit it for another one. This is not one we can rush. We've really got to stay in control of this. And there's just little areas where one panel's a little bit offset to the other one. So I'm working them as I go, tapping them around. If we wind up with like a depression in the middle, like between where the weld is, we can tap that out later. So I'm not really worried about the straight line along there having a little bit of a bow in it, because we can tidy that up. But I just want the two edges to sit nicely together, butted together, and that way I can get a straight weld on there. And I don't even have to really grind this side of the weld because it's going to be inside the tailgate, but we want everything to line up so we can finish it nice. And the reality is, the more effort we put into preparation on this sort of work, the better the job's going to wind up. I'm welding a full plate thickness up to where I normally would be for this sort of job, just because the heat's being sucked out of the weld. Alright, just blown a bit of a hole, and it's where the metal's got the stretch in the corner, and I knew I would, but I've just come around there, and as it sort of hit that soft spot on the edge, or the thin patch on the edge there, it's just knocked a hole straight through it. So no problem, we'll just weld that up as we get to it. So it's just a matter of working my way around off my welds I've got now, and I'll weld another piece of weld onto each weld, and I'll keep working my way around until we get a full weld everywhere. That side is done. All the way through there. Just the corners. Just going to let this cool down by itself now. It's welded all the way around, and then we'll get it into the folder and we'll actually fold our edges on it. But we may have to grind some of these sides just to get the clearance I need to be able to do the bends, but we'll see how we go, because the reality is anything in here like this doesn't matter if we leave it there or not, because this is buried inside the tailgate. But if we need the clearance, we'll grind him off smooth and that'll still work as well. I've let all this cool down and I've just come back and taken all the clamps off it, and it's got a little bit of warpage in it, nothing much to worry about. I've got a little bit of a oil can there, but that'll come out easily enough. I've gone and checked my original pattern. I do need to grind all these edges off just so that I can get it into the press brake close enough that I can fold the corners. But we've got really good weld penetration, so we've burnt through pretty much all the way through on the other side. So what I will do before I try and hit it at all is I'll give everything a grind up to relieve any stresses that the bulk of the weld is holding in there, and then we'll just go on it from there. Now I've ground inside and out, and as I expected, the oil can part of it is gone. It's not 150% flat, but it's stiffened it right up. And that's because we've taken the crown off the welds and we've released the tension in the welds there. I've smoothed the back as well, and that was all beneficial. We've still got a little bit of a ripple just in line with the corners. I haven't even tried to take them out. We'll give them a couple of taps and see what they want to do. But it's that minute, it's not even really worth worrying about. But we'll hit it and see what it wants to do anyway. Now the tension in the sheet's just around the corners, so theoretically just sort of working these little corners around here should help the sheet. Alright, it's helped this edge here with a little bit more material, but on the bottom it hasn't really changed it much at all. But I think I'm just going to leave it and fold it from there, and we'll work with whatever we've got to do later. So the end should be about there. So now we've just got to fold it all up and make it into a pan. What I'm hoping to do here is to cut this so that we've got enough material on the edge of the corner to hammer form it up and make a little corner radius in there, and have enough material when we fold it up. We'll have like a flap on the end here that we can wrap around the corner. So we'll just see how we go with that. I've just cut the corners off and I have marked out my angles, and I've allowed myself 6mm to throw up as a little form in the corner, and then I want to bring these side folded pieces in on top of that. So not entirely certain how it's going to look at this stage once I start folding it, but I've got to be able to cut in here without damaging it too much. So I've got a bit of 6mm fine line tape, and I'll just cut around the corner of that, and that should get us close to where we want to be, with a bit of luck. Now I'm thinking on the top corner, not really sure what I'm going to do there because it's got such a tight little radius. I think I'll just fold it in a straight line and then we'll cut a piece out of it later or drill a hole in the corner and just sort of get the join of the metal to sit together after that. We'll play that one by ear as we go. The whole on the fly approach. So I'm thinking, now that's not clever. Aim for the wrong spot. I think I want to go about there. Okay, let's do some damage and bend it. Just testing the depth of fold. So we're not quite 90, so when we put a bigger piece in there it'll be a lot less than 90, but we can just creep the angle up. Might as well have a look at what I was doing around the corner. This is a full mechanical press brake, so all it's got is this little micro switch here to trip the travel over. So these settings on the top here, if you're doing a sequence of bends, you can preset the angles of your bends by moving these rollers up and down. And when the bar comes down, this whole assembly comes down, trips this little micro switch the other way and just sets it to the return up position. And this bottom arrangement here, you can adjust and it'll adjust how far the bar comes back up again. So it's very simple, no big electronics on it, no boxes to die and things like that. So these old girls are just the best press brakes ever. So now that I've got the angle almost to 90, what do we got? We're not quite, we're probably close enough to leave it, but I've just got to roll that little roller up the thread of whisker and the bar will come down just a little bit more. So just try it at that, and that's probably enough for this fold. Well, that's pretty close to 90 degrees just looking at it, so we'll leave him there for now. So what we're going to do is we'll hammer form these corners following the line around, but I can fold the ends now, so we can get that in there, and providing we've got enough room to get that out the way. So if I put another piece of blade in here, I can tip it up here, and this section here can fold down past the end of the bar there. But I just have to watch that bolt. Sometimes they run into that when you're working on the end. When I want it to bottom on the pressure relief, I just wind one of those rollers up past the point where it'll trip the lever over, and it'll just come down until the hydraulics stop it from moving. I think we'll leave him at that. We'll do the other end. Okie doke. So So we've got the last fold now, is this piece in here. So what I'll do, I'm just going to have to cut one of these sides to give us enough room for it to come in. Or fold it right out the way. I might bend that back that way. Same on the other end. And I'll straighten these corners here on the where I've bent it on the overpass. Okay, one to go. Okay. Look at that, on the money. Now the top one I want to overbend a little bit. So what I'm going to do, we've got a bit of oil can now that we've put some stress into it. We're going to have this sit in our tailgate. The bottom line's going to be square. The top one I want to angle just back a little bit, so when we put the license plate lights in there, they'll shine towards the license plate, and also the top of the tailgate will shield them a little bit, so we've not got no white light facing backwards on the car. So I might just creep him down a little bit more. We will wind up opening these out again, but that's hammer and dolly work later on to sort them out once we've got it all trimmed and the corners made. Okay, so now we've got a little overbend. We've just gone past 90. It will need a little bit more, but we can tweak that by hand, and there's no reason why we can't come back later and give a bit more of a bend. So I'm going to hammer form these now. I'll make these corners, sit them all together, and I also want a small radius in the top. But because it's such a small area in here, I'll probably wind up just drilling a hole in the corner to remove the material out of the very corner, and then I can roll my sheet metal around. And the main reason is for painting. If we wind up with a sharp crease in there, a spray gun, once you start blowing into the corner, a percentage of the air is going to get into the corner without carrying paint, and it's going to bounce back and it'll blow the paint out the way. So it's very hard to paint into a tight corner like that. But if we round it, we can come in and let the paint and the air flow in and hit the round surface, and we have less problems. Okie doke guys, I'm going to call it for today on this project here, and when we come back I'll have some hammer forms made and we can actually start fitting it into the tailgate, put our license plate lights in it, and we're nearly there. But you can see from here we're getting very close to what we're looking for. Stay safe guys, talk to you soon.